Well, thanks so much for coming this morning.
Thanks for having
Did you guys have fun?
Yeah,
it was really good.
So it was so lovely to just like have a nurturing space. I was saying how caring the event felt. Like you really took care of us all. It was lovely.
Good.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah, we you know, you go to so many events, and especially because like we work in fashion, sometimes they're a little bit like pretentious, and we just did not.
Did you really
want
just
to
say that?
Overly curated as sort of.
Yeah.
It was really relaxed. It was really nice.
Yeah, awesome. And you knew a few people there, right?
Yeah. I knew one person, but we met Emma Cortez. Is it? Costa. Emma Costa through
Awesome.
Zoe Cunliffe. So we had like dreamy chats. It was good.
Awesome. So cool. And I had the absolute pleasure of also having dinner with you guys. Was that last week?
It was.
Whoa, that feels like forever ago.
Yes.
Which was absolutely magical. And like, I remember Rosie just sitting with you at dinner, and like, I caught myself with the biggest smile on my face, just like being in your presence and listening to you talk. And I was just thinking, holy crap, I can't believe we're about to have these chicks on the podcast. It's going to be so epic.
I'm pretty sure I ranted at you for half an hour.
No, but it was a magical rant, and I loved it.
Well, it was one of those amazing spaces where you could go and, as a bunch of women, I think, like have a vent about all the different things that are going on. Just the challenges that you're facing and the roadblocks, and no one necessarily needed to have solutions. It was just the place where you could go and just be like, you know what, that's not working for me either.
Totally.
It was just a vent. It was really healthy. I left feeling lighter.
Also, we've been talking about that lately because like we always say that like our family is big on like, if you have a problem, how can we fix it? You know, and like sometimes it is nice to just be like, I just want to focus on the issue for a sec and just like allow myself to feel the feelings that I feel currently.
Totally. So something that you said at the event to me, though, that really stuck with me was like we were chatting about like everything that you're doing. And, you know, when we were talking about Project Rockit, you were like, the reason that it was so cool that we got to start it when we were so young was because I was fresh out of high school, and I just all of a sudden got to have all the conversations that I wanted to have when I was in high school. So what were your experiences like at high school?
I think Ro and I both probably had pretty different experiences. We're 3 years apart, so as two siblings in a family, you tend to, you know, pit yourselves as like a complementary kind of opposite team. But also 3 years apart at the same school, and really I think that despite being quite different socially and academically and our interests and passions, we both had really shared values, and I'm sure that's obviously a common thing with you guys as well.
Similar.
Yeah, and so stepping into a school arena where I don't know, everyone's navigating, like, let's be honest, such complex issues throughout being a teen. It's you see the broad strokes of that from the outside looking in as an adult, but going back there and really returning to what it was like being a teenager growing up, I just remember, you know, really tough stuff. People challenged with the idea of like working out who you are, what your values are, when you're supposed to stand out and when you're supposed to fit in, and you don't want to do either of those too much.
Totally.
Working out how to challenge your friends and when to go along with things that you're not sure about, as well as challenging the things that you definitely disagree with. And I know that those deep questions were very much front and center for both of us, although our teen experiences would have been pretty different. Is that fair?
Yeah, I guess I'd jump in off the back of that and say people often look at us and think that we're identical, like we're just chuck one in for the other, we're absolutely the same person. But yeah,
Totally, because you share a brand, a business,
yeah,
you do a lot together.
I'm sure
we get the exact same.
I'm
thing.
embarrassed to say I thought you were twins until last Thursday.
Yeah, and I think I said the same thing to you as
Yeah,
well. So
right.
anyway, now
Same
that's
thing.
done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the one thing that we really shared, aside from our values really, was also that like we were hungry for vulnerability, I think, in our friendship groups. Like I think we were trying to have the conversations with our friends at the time around like identity, around the things that we wanted to see in the world, or the way we wanted school to be better for certain people or for everybody. But those conversations definitely weren't had at school, and I think we really felt the fallout of not addressing some of those really big questions that as a young person you need to be addressing to make sure that you do feel comfortable with who you are, and you know can basically see other people for who they are and respect and accept them as well. Those conversations just didn't exist when we were at school.
Yeah, totally. And so did you have a rough time at school, or for you were you kind of like good, you had good friends, but you just were kind of noticing that there was a lack of that?
Well, I wouldn't characterize school as easy for me. I wouldn't characterize it as difficult either. Like I think looking back on my own school experience, I definitely think I drew a pretty good ticket if you like, at the beginning of school. So for whatever reason, I did have a pretty positive school experience. So I had fairly supportive friends. Definitely had my ups and downs, and like I think it's really important for us all to connect with those times because we've all had them, and definitely know what it's like to be bullied as well. You know, to be isolated and for people to turn against you, and at that point when your whole world is your social setting, essentially, like your connections, the cohesion that you feel at school, to suddenly not have that, is definitely an experience that I think really stays with you. But I think for me at school, and what really connected me to wanting to start something like Project Rockit was actually more identifying as the majority of people in a bullying situation, if you like. You know, those who see it happen and can do something in the moment, could do something, could stand up. And sometimes I stood up, and there were plenty of times that I didn't as well. And I think for me, it was really about, a hunger and a yearning for social justice and for fairness, and just a belief that we can all do so much better, and a belief that we should all be connecting with one another, which is at odds with the teenage experience at times because of the fragility that Luce was talking about there around like really getting mixed messages about being told to stand out but feeling like we needed to fit in. And so, yeah, I guess for me it was really more so around like wanting to really inspire my peers and help my peers connect to one another, and create just a better place where people can really be comfortable and vulnerable and free to be themselves.
So that's like such a big, I guess, topic for anyone to tackle, let alone like someone who's young. And, you know, like we're constantly hearing, you know, kind of like looking at younger people like, oh, they haven't had that much experience, like they don't know, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, it's often we look to the older people to kind of lead the way. But you guys were just like, nah, right, like we see this kind of injustice happening and we want to make that change. What was that like for you as young people? Did you like feel like you were well equipped to take that on?
Well, I think I'll get to that question. I think it's a really interesting one because we've met a lot of opposition, definitely, as young people wanting to set out and start something. But I guess my experience of school was really different to yours, and it really leads into that question that it was one of definitely of contradictions. Like I loved school and I did pretty well at school. I did okay academically, and at the same time really battled with my mental health throughout high school, as so many young people do, and felt completely isolated and held back by that, and also that it was a huge kind of weakness and shortcoming. I was definitely a bit of a floater across different social groups. I wouldn't say that I was severely bullied, but like everyone, encountered what it's like to be picked on for being yourself, basically. And yeah, it was also felt like, I'm sure this is a relatable experience for many teens. At different times I wondered if I actually was an alien and had been transplanted into the body of a 15-year-old girl growing up in Melbourne, because I was like, clearly I'm a freak. Everyone can see it.
Really did.
I'm never going to connect with anyone. No one's ever going to love me or know who I am. You know, that kind of...
Yeah, wow, that's so powerful.
Yeah, and I guess like, you know, growing up really, really close to my sister, but I grew up with like a really troubled relationship with my dad, and so understood the kind of conflicts of opposition in what we're dealing with in finding our way in the world. And I felt like I was a complete oddball, but finishing school realised that I looked around and was like, oh my gosh, everyone was feeling like a total alien freak weirdo.
Totally, and no one's saying it though.
Yeah, and if we were able to draw on those individual experiences in unity, but allowing diversity and difference to exist in those stories of like what it's like being young and growing up in school, then we would have like such a better approach to tackling an issue like bullying, which is basically built on targeting people because of their diversity. Like imagine if we use those experiences of understanding exactly what it's like to be young to target this issue that affects young people disproportionately, this issue of bullying. And so for us, we knew immediately that being young was actually a qualifier to be dealing with these issues, that we had no academic or tertiary qualifications and no real broad professional experiences running an organisation or a business, but actually that the further we got from this issue, the less able we'd be to connect with it and understand and really impact and positively empower people to feel like it was their issue and that they could take charge of it. So for us, I guess that was the real strength that we saw, and we did get a real surprise when people didn't respond as favourably, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, today we all know that the agreed best practice for when it comes to working with young people is generally young people working with young people. It's sort of that peer-to-peer approach, but I don't think that was a huge thing at all when we started out. For us, it obviously made so much sense. You know, people kept asking us when we first started out, what are your qualifications? And I honestly, to this day, don't know what qualification you could possibly need or have to do the job that we do, and that actually at that time our best qualification was being young people, and there was such an enormous gap that we looked around and we saw that no one was actually engaging young people in a way that was relevant or positive or cool or actually listened to their opinions. And so Project Rockit was really born from the idea that, well, maybe we could be those somebodies, if you like, that could start something. You know, we had no idea if it was going to work or take off or be successful. But did we have the confidence to do it? I'm going to say yes. I think we really do. I think that's one of the beauties about youth, which I wish we could retain.
Oh my God, totally. Yes.
Right, just
so much guts that we just like, now you like have so much more self-doubt than you did when you were like 18 and just like ready to do anything.
I think like I'd almost describe our desire for change or hunger for change as like insatiable. Like we were so driven and so committed, and just nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody understood what we were doing. I swear, like, it's really only the last few years that I think our family have really started to understand it. And in a way, that's because the landscape has changed around social change. People use the word social enterprise or social change, and whereas that whole ecosystem didn't even exist when we started out.
Yeah. So did you know you were starting a business when you were starting it, or was it? I'm imagining like you guys like having sleepovers in your rooms and being like, "Oh, this would be so cool if we did this." Like,
I wish we were having sleepovers. I'm the annoying little sister, so basically, you would never want to have a sleepover. I'm just teasing.
That just literally broke my heart.
Did it? I feel like I always used to sleep in your room. I'm the older sister.
No. I never had that problem.
We still when we travel, so we do a lot of travel. We're going to DC to do some work in a couple of months, and we noticed they'd booked us separate rooms, and we were so we'd still sleep in the same bed.
Oh, same. Yeah, we did too.
But so we really did. But I also have memories of growing up, and we used to share a bedroom at one stage. Yeah, and I remember as a teenager, like pouring out my heart and talking about like, you know, what's this, the politics at school or heartbreaks or whatever it is, and Luce would just say, like, cut me up and say, sleep time.
Honestly though, she has a lot to say, and that's great. I love one of Rose's rants or vents, as she put it. But yeah, gal's got to sleep. So starting out, we had no idea we were starting something. It wasn't our intention. I don't think we set out to build a career, or even like we didn't even see it as a professional opportunity. We just
were like, problem, let's do something about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
let's give it a crack.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really just wanted to impact some people in some schools and thought that would be cool. And I guess that's also why starting out, we really decided early on to start Project Rockit as a business, as a social enterprise, rather than as a not-for-profit. We saw, and I guess in some ways rightly so, although the model's changing, that if we started a not-for-profit, then that would be very honourable, and we'd set up a governance board and we might procure some funding, but we had no way of understanding whether that would actually be impactful, because our model as millennials was that if people want it, they'll buy it. If it's impactful, they'll have us back, and that way it'll kind of be self-evaluating, and you know, we'll know that the people actually want this offering, that there's a place for it, other than in our own hearts and minds we think that this is really awesome. And so that's why we started Project Rockit, not realizing that it would be impactful, that although we'd have struggles getting into schools to begin with, and that we'd have to do a lot of convincing with teachers, I guess, and those who make decisions in schools as to the importance of a program like this, we didn't really anticipate that they'd love it, and that young people would really push for more and more of this in schools over the next 10 years. And also we didn't realise that our lives would start to spill further and further online, and that this issue of cyberbullying would then become a big problem for schools to address as well.
And so going into your first school...
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like going into your first school and seeing like that face-to-face time with those kids and feeling the impact, like what was that like?
I remember it perfectly. Like I feel emotional even just talking about it, because it's the best job that I've ever had. Of all the iterations of roles that I've had, like now we're the co-CEOs of Project Rockit, the best job that exists at Project Rockit without a doubt is a program presenter or a facilitator. Our very first school was our old school, which was Wesley College.
Wow.
The best place to start. You're in
Yeah,
school.
so of course we went back to them and said, hey, we've had an idea. And we just finished, in fact. And I actually remember that the fire alarm went off in one of our workshops, and we were all sort of like shepherded out onto the oval, where we bumped into all of our old teachers who we'd basically just left school. But yeah, I remember it really well. Luce and I were definitely the guinea pigs back then of all of our content. We decided from the beginning at Project Rockit that we weren't just going to go into schools and lecture students or preach or judge or stand at the front and just talk, that instead we were going to come up with a really creative approach, and that we were going to, like, rather than stand up front and tell a message, think of a really, like, fun and random and memorable way in which we can engage young people. Might be like a social experiment that has this aha moment of revelation where we trick young people basically into learning and then have a discussion around what's really important to them. So at the time, though, I mean, I was a couple of years out of school myself. I was only a few years older than the students that we were working with. And so that was pretty amazing to then be having the conversations with young people that I wanted to have, that I needed to have when I was at school, and genuinely learning just as much as them. And it's pretty cool that, like, then I got to spend the next, like, 7 or 8 years, and now presenters get to spend all that time in schools learning themselves. Like, we talk about some of the biggest issues. We talk about, you know, misogyny. We talk about social labels and judgment and what's holding us back. These are all questions that I think we need to be asking throughout our entire lives, not just as a teenager. But it was really cool to start having these conversations in schools and to just see it land, and to see young people who at first were really defensive, understandably. The issue is so stigmatized. You expect the worst. But over time, we really built so much rapport, and you could really just see people, like, really the eyes opening, and even just to see the associations of connections and emotional energy in the room, that people might walk in as all individuals, but at the end of a Project Rockit workshop we saw them sort of leaving, you know, a little bit more united, understanding each other a bit better. And these were just the kernels of, in the early days, that we thought, hang on, I think we're onto something, I think this is working. And then, as Luce said, you know, we did have some big critics, and often those critics were the teachers who, this was quite new to be addressing these issues at school.
And especially
also,
if they saw you as students just a few years out. Like, they're kind of like, oh, you're young. What do you know?
And so we did, like, I do have some memories even of teachers standing up the back of the room, like almost shooting you death stares, arms crossed, like willing you to fail, basically. But it was actually those same people that after Project Rockit workshops became our biggest advocates. So they really did see, I think, the power of creating real talk in schools around the stuff that really matters.
Yeah, so like in the same way that the kids' kind of barriers were being broken down, it was also happening in adults, which is cool.
So
I'm interested to hear, because I think for you guys, like, you're just like, yeah, we went and did this, you know, and it's obviously just like, you know, in your nature to just go and do. But that's pretty freaking cool that you were like a few years out of school and you recognize that there was this need to approach it in a different way and not just go in and like lecture the kids, like you said, like trick them into learning. But you were only, you know, kids yourselves. What kind of do you think led you to that, or what in your lives made you think about things in a different way like that and really have that power to be able to inspire other people?
Well, first of all, I think we can probably all connect with the frustration of being a teen and people coming in telling you about your own life on whatever issue that is, you know.
I hate being told what to do.
I especially hated being told what to do at 16.
Yeah.
At 27, I really struggle.
Right on.
Noted.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had experiences of participating in an education system that is basically centered around young people being like the recipients of knowledge and talking, especially when it's about the issues that matter most, or the really hard issues that we don't have answers to. So you named some of them before around like, misogyny or identity or dismantling racism or homophobia or transphobia or slut shaming. To have like an old white dude talk down to you about those issues seems to be a little, well, I mean, it's not going to land. And so I think we had that motivation of just a seething but excited frustration as to around the world and how it could be. And I noticed that when we finished school, it's kind of that optimal time where you either feel equipped to step out into the world and possibility and travel and university or career or whatever, but you also notice the people that seem to disappear off the face of the earth. And I think one parallel for both of us when we started having these conversations was that a parallel would be that we both felt well enough when we finished school and whole enough to take the next step, but notice that, yeah, there are a lot of peers who didn't. And I can say that I genuinely, throughout high school, really cared about the people around me. I really cared about those folks, and I just never saw them again after school. And I really looked back and felt haunted by reflecting on the way that they'd been treated by others, and perhaps my inaction around their treatment as well, that where possible, I do think I did try to stand up for them or reach out to them, but I think I could have done a lot more. And I think that I want to name that I think bullying is an awful issue that affects those who are targeted. It has terrible effects on those that bully others, but also on all of us. You know, when we stand by watching, we're complicit in a society that tolerates the worst of behaviour. And I think that really stayed with both of us. It was a real driver for wanting to just like agitate and make change, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess we started to really talk about, after finishing school, just before starting Project Rockit, really sort of dreaming up what school could look like, and more so what the world could really look like. Because really what we're working on is helping young people be phenomenal world citizens, you know, to build that world. And the world that we really looked at building, that we've been working on for the last 13 years, was a world where kindness and respect thrive over bullying, hate and prejudice, and all young people are free to realise their potential. And I think now, as adults and as cyberbullying experts and whatever other hats we're described as, we know that bullying has, you know, massive negative impacts on all people. You know, that it leads to criminal violence and drug and alcohol abuse and really horrible mental health outcomes. We know all that stuff now, but actually at the time, having just finished school, what Luce is describing there, wondering what happened to our peers, you know, the ones that drew a bad ticket at the beginning of school and were really judged and labelled and, you know, isolated and ignored. Well, we started to really think that it's actually their potential that is being robbed, you know, that when you mistreat somebody for so long, you actually smother their development, and, you know, you extinguish their potential basically. And we really, really saw that over time, you know, the people that might have arrived at school on the first day of year 7 with great enthusiasm and wanting to give it a crack and access learning and all those opportunities, basically over time became a shell of that human being. And we just thought that was so unfair. And most of all, being the type of people that we were, I think also at school, the type of people that were inclined to stand up, that were inclined to use whatever power we had to influence the group around us, to use their power for good, we decided that maybe we could, you know, really, really start something in school, something really, really practical that was going to give young people really cool ways, safe ways that they can actually stand up and make a real difference, not just in their school communities, but in the world as well, like beyond.
But I guess the last and probably the core uniting driver for both of us would be our mum. That I'd say she's played a big role in why Project Rockit started. That growing up, she was not a helicopter parent. She was not an enabler of like shitty behaviour from your own kid. She didn't praise us too much. She was a tough, fierce, proud single mum. And I know for both of us, we often reflect that when we came home from school and reported back on something terrible we'd seen or something that had upset us, her response wasn't one of commiseration. It was one of like, well, what did you do about it? Well, what are you going to do about this? You know, she tolerated very little in terms of, you know, our own inaction. And so, yeah, I guess for us, like it got to a point where accumulatively we'd had enough experiences of seeing things that weren't okay in the world. And we'd grown up with a model of like citizenship that meant that you bloody do something when you disagree. And so that's why Project Rockit was started.
That's awesome. Your mum sounds amazing.
Yeah.
She's the best.
So I feel like I'm going a bit off script here, but I feel like it would be inauthentic of me to have this conversation without actually addressing the fact that I was quite a bully when I was young. Not so much when I was kind of like older, like 15, 16. It was more when I was kind of like probably like 10 to 12, I want to say. And I do feel like so much remorse. Like I'm even like a bit shaky even like talking about it right now. And I feel like completely sick even thinking about those things. But I guess I'm interested in like, what does make someone act in that way? You know, like I do believe that like I have a very good heart and I am a really good person, but like, why do people become bullies? And like, does it like filter over to like adults as well, you know, because there is a lot of like we hear about like adult bullying in the workplace and things like that. Like where does it stem from?
It's a great question. I don't think there's like a simple answer to that question. One of the fundamental drivers of bullying is that most people who bully are striving for power. It is, it's built on an imbalance of power. So trying to have power or control or over your own life or by having power over someone else. So I think that's probably a common link. But that said, there are so many different reasons why people might be compelled to have power over someone else. And, you know, popular
probably
media,
going back to their childhoods as well. Like, we don't know what's going on at home with everyone and how, you know, the things that have impacted them, and maybe someone's bullying them at home and then they lash out and repeat that behavior.
Yeah. And I think, like, you know, we turn on your average American teen movie and we get a really singular narrative of bullying, that it's, you know, it's often like largely physical. It's the employing some stereotypes here, but the jock picking on the geek, or the
head down the toilet kind of crap.
popular mean girl picking on, I don't know who the non-popular mean girl is, whatever. We see these narratives playing out again and again, but they're much more complex than that. And, you know, similarly, there are lots of stereotypes, like those who bully have really low self-esteem, when in fact those who bully, some of them have really high self-esteem. That's not the issue. But essentially, I think it goes back to that wrestle for power, and not being able to find healthy ways to feel empowered in your sense of your own agency in the world. And I'm not sure if that resonates with you, that there may have been some other issues within you fueling that at the time. I'm not sure.
And then do you kind of, you know, in schools, obviously you're not just working with victims of bullying, you're working with all kids. Are there things that you do with kids that are bullies? Do you identify that, or do you feel like you're just kind of, the things that you guys do empowers everyone across the board and hopefully just like levels everyone out a little bit?
Yeah, really good question, because it really comes back to the design of Project Rockit, the values and our approach, I think, from the get-go. And first of all, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think people often tend to, especially adults, tend to look at the issue of bullying through the lens of bully and victim. And I think the troubling fact about that is that we all have the capability to bully and to also be targeted against. And I look back, I will freely admit there were times when I was at school where I was involved in bullying, like absolutely part of the problem. Laughed when people were upset, did position people covertly so that, you know, someone would be left out. Like, I've definitely experienced that myself. And I think it's really important that we do acknowledge it, because it's really important as a young person too, when we're working with young people, that we give them the freedom at a point to wipe the slate clean and to be able to reinvent themselves and to be the person that they want to be remembered for.
And especially when you are young and you are sometimes the target of bullying, well then, you know, if it turns to someone else, you kind of want to get in on that and laugh at them too, so that people aren't laughing at you. Like, I think that's a really common experience, that most people have probably been involved in bullying in some way, shape or form.
And again, that's a perfect example of someone's motivation being trying to gain power, trying to have some degree of power or safety. But for us, that's why, as we're named, it's been really important that rather than setting up this dichotomy of you're the bully or the victim, which leaves little room to change or to grow, we tend to look at bullying as a behaviour that all of us are capable of, and therefore all of us are capable of challenging. Even if you're not the most confident person who can jump out and bust out a snappy, sassy comeback, or, you know, to actually physically get someone out of a rough situation, you may be the kind of person who can empathetically support someone afterwards, or challenge the negative messaging that they've received and provide an alternate message about themselves. So again, it's much more... Our approach has been one of looking at the complexities of human experience and understanding that at the core, we all have the potential to harm others, and we all have the potential to be kind. And when we really empower people with that choice, I'm really confident. I believe that the vast majority of us do have a striving towards kindness and compassion. But unfortunately, if you've been labelled as the bully, then it's really difficult to create that change. And if you've been labelled as the victim, then it's difficult to see yourself as an empowered agent in the world as well.
So our workshops work with a whole year level. The idea being that we also use like the positive power of peer pressure. It's a lot of P's, so it's a lot of alliteration. The positive power of peer pressure. So the idea being that, you know, if 1 in 5 young people are experiencing bullying, then there were 3 people that were seeing it happen. And so we want to really create cultures at school where bullying is really not cool, basically, as basic as it is. And we're empowering the majority of people to take ownership over the culture at school, equipping them with the amount of empathy that they can, you know, really give a damn about each other, and some really implementable strategies that are based on their level of confidence or their level of status in a school, so that they can like shut down hate when they see it happen. So yeah, we're very much dealing with a whole year level at once, and rather than like singling people out.
And I feel like all of these things you're saying are so fantastic. Like, you know, like reminding people, like creating connections and compassion. And I feel like you need to run workshops for adults. Like we all need a little bit of this in our lives, you know, and like bullying is something that like people experience throughout their whole lives. And like, it just sounds like in general, you're just like creating well-balanced human beings, which is awesome.
Yeah. And leading with like compassion in your heart, which is like, I think the key to change and hopefully people can do more of in the future. So that's really interesting. I guess maybe we could shift focus a little bit and get back to you guys and the fabulous kind of business that you've created through this. So you guys are sisters and you're in business together. So what's that been like for you? How is it being in business with a partner? It's something that we get asked about constantly and we often recommend it. Do you guys also?
Oh, I don't know. It's pretty terrible and I do hate it. It's the best.
Especially when you're trying to sleep.
You guys can't see my death stare at my big sister, but I would absolutely recommend it. I absolutely love it. It's the most important thing in my life because I get to work with my sister. And I really, I say this all the time, but I feel so fortunate to have been born into the most synergetic relationship I think I will ever experience my whole life. And it's only enriched our sister relationship. We're so unbelievably close. And I think working together at times when we're living together, you know, being absolute best friends and the biggest support in each other's lives, the biggest cheerleader, opportunity maker, whatever you call it, does come with a level of responsibility to really nurture that, respect it, and to really have boundaries around that too, I think, because there's so much on the line. But at the same time, I think we maybe felt that when we started off with Project Rockit, because we're obviously spending all of our time doing it, spending all of our time together, that it did feel like, oh, this is a lot. You know, we're spending a lot of time with each other. If something goes wrong, this could really break. But I think it's only meant that we've built like the most respectful relationship. And yeah, it's not a danger at all. It's only an opportunity. I love it. I recommend it.
Someone said to us recently, I mean, people say to us all the time, actually, like, oh my God, like I could never go into business with my family. Like I'd be so scared it's going to ruin the relationship. But like we say, like for us, being sisters is number one. We would never let anything get in the way of that. We would, especially like business, you know, or money or anything like that. Like at the end of the day, if family is like what you really value, then going into business together can't ruin that relationship because that's what you're always going to put first.
100%.
I think a lot of the time people ask, without the lived experience that you have, like, what's it like working with your sister? And I kind of like wonder, like, okay, well, what's it like working for another organisation? Because I've never worked for another organisation either. What's it like having a conventional job? Yeah. What's it like having someone else do your like shitty work that's like payroll, paying for the building, like resolving conflicts in the workplace? Because you do everything when you run a job like this. So I actually like, it's hard to separate it from the other unique aspects of running an organisation like Project Rockit. But I would definitely say that it comes to challenges. The biggest challenge I think for me being finding that balance between complementing each other's skills and understanding that, like, to be candid, I'm massively introverted, Rose an extrovert. So there are lots of, I'm scared to make phone calls. So it would be easy for me every time we have to do something as simple as making a phone call in our business to be like, that's your job.
Oh, that would suck.
Yeah, it would suck. Understanding like where to let the other person do what they do well, and also where to extend yourself or push yourself to grow and do better. I found that a real challenge when you have such an intrinsic understanding of each other's abilities and wanting to grow her. I want to grow her strengths. I want to shine a spotlight on them, and at the same time know that I can't excuse my own shortcomings and I need to find ways to improve as a result. So I see those as being challenges that being a big challenge when you know someone so intimately and so personally as well.
I think we also hold each other accountable to that though as well. Like at the same time, I think it's brilliant that we've been able to like carve out our own paths, if you like, running Project Rockit. Like we have very, very, very different roles and they're very complementary, but they're very different. But at the same time, recognizing that, while I might be naturally better at something, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be working on that too, and you should have opportunities to develop as well and vice versa. So I think when it comes to growth opportunities where we serve each other really, really well there, I think.
What are your different roles?
Do you want me to explain?
Sure, go
cool.
for it.
So I guess at Project Rockit, we're a social enterprise. And so when we were sort of carving out how we can actually take this organisation to scale and basically be a national organisation that serves schools all over Australia, we really realised that we needed to really make sure that we had really clear and distinct roles. And so we've actually divided our co-CEO role down the middle, and we have a CEO of social impact. So basically, Luce's role, do you want to explain your role?
Right. So if in a social enterprise, part of it's about running a sustainable business, and the other part obviously is about creating social impact. So I quite consciously put on the impact hat, which means that I, at all times throughout our growth, want to make sure that we're growing with our mission front and center, a world where kindness and respect thrive over bullying, hate and prejudice, to make sure that we grow in a way that is true to diversity and inclusion and access. So making sure that we continue to evolve and do better, and basically make sure that we never feel done when it comes to creating an inclusive and equitable organisation. It means making sure that we do put young people at the centre. So I work really closely with our Youth Brains Trust. We put together it's almost like a board, I'd say, of young people aged 13 to 20 who steer the direction of the organisation. So they personally guide me on what Project Rockit should be doing next, and any new offerings are kind of designed and scoped and sculpted by them, which is pretty cool. And I'm lucky I get to have such wonderful conversations with them, and they're charged with such a position of genuine leadership within our organisation, and basically holding all of our content, evolving our workshop content, training our presenters, and putting the tools in their hands so that they can steer the direction of a youth-led organisation.
Luce is a creative genius too. Might I just say that when we started Project Rockit, there was no like Squarespace templates or anything. Luce read the book Coding for Dummies and coded our entire website.
It was
all
really
of the
bad.
designs to this
So
day.
bad.
We've created Project Rockit online, a whole bunch of digital resources. Luce, all the design is actually Luce. Like, she's a phenomenal artist. But so I guess Luce drives our mission, and our mission is our North Star. Like, ultimately, that is our moral compass. But, you can create something that's so impactful, but if you can't actually drive it forward and get it into schools, then it's in a complete waste. So my role is I'm CEO of innovation. So I work with the business side of things, driving our impact forward, basically. So work with different partnerships, strategic expansion, really looking for really powerful and innovative ways we can grow the movement all over Australia, and also other side of Australia as well.
And to toot Rose horn for a second, that sounds like it could be quite like dry, like, growing a business. It sounds like anyone could do it, but actually, because we both started out with the same social driver to start an organisation, she brings that belief in fostering really genuine relationships and cultivating like-minded partnerships and connections to that. So it's still very much imbued with that underlying mission, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of cool watching her and empowering her and supporting her to scale in a way that is true to why she got started, as well as why we got started, of course. It's kind of cool.
You girls are so freaking cute. I can't handle
they
it.
are so cute.
Like, we've never interviewed sisters before, but I love the way you each just gave your roles, but then you each gave a really nice piece about why the other one is so awesome at her role.
I was just thinking the exact same thing, and like watching the two of you together, like you have the best dynamic, and it's like nothing.
Like better than Mary Kate and Ashley.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's so special to watch, and it makes me like, it's even more special because I feel like it's how people,
Because you get it.
It's
totally.
how people see us as well. And I think that that's so cool that, like, at the core of that is just like this epic sisterly bond where like you just want each other to succeed, which like I feel watching the two of you, and I like mirror that same sentiment.
I will be so disappointed if when I have kids, I don't have two girls.
Yeah.
So that they go,
Yeah,
so I
we
can
have a
raise
cousin
sisters.
who has one girl,
Yeah.
but she's got two sisters.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want any more kids, and she's got one girl, and she's like, I find that really
She needs a
difficult.
sister.
knowing
Everyone
that,
needs a sister.
Yeah,
It's-
totally.
And even if it's not a sister, like it can
Yeah.
be a best friend.
It
like
can.
there's that like
Or a
real-
brother, I guess. I'm sure there are great, sister brother.
Nah, we don't
duos
want
out
that.
there.
The other thing that I was thinking from listening to you guys talk that is really cool is like, I've always thought of a social enterprise as a not-for-profit that wants to like, be a little bit more like self-sustainable. But the way you guys describe it and the way you have these two aspects, which is like the business side and the for good side, is kind of like all businesses should have that. Like it's actually just a midway point between a business and a not-for-profit. And why, like you can't have, just like you can't have the social impact side without driving the business forward, in this day and age, we really can't have the business side without the social impact driving it forward as well.
Yeah. I think not-for-profits these days have to think and act commercially, and for-profit have to think and act for purpose. Like, I think, it's almost people out there that are trying to understand social enterprise. It's like, don't get bogged down in trying to understand it. It's just a business that does good.
Yeah,
that's
which
so
all
true,
businesses should.
And like, I think, just true to that very first day when we decided on that teen instinct to be for-profit, was the best decision we made, because it's meant that we've relied on having a robust business model till this day where schools pay for our workshops. That's not to say, though, as a social business, there were plenty of other organisations, particularly global social media platforms out there, that have a huge stake and a huge responsibility to be positively contributing to these issues. And so we're in a really awesome position to procure amazing partnerships with those guys, to fund and to scale Project Rockit so that we can reach schools that can't afford to pay for it themselves. So we get to be really creative. Like, Project Rockit isn't just a do-good organisation. We're really, really proud to be a really effective social enterprise, both in impact and to be still standing and profitable and sustainable after 13 years, and after, I guess, being started by two little kids that had to really work it out as they went.
Yeah,
Completely.
totally. And two little kids that have come so far. And we were like, when we were like doing the research on you, we were like, oh my goodness, they both have OAMs. That is so fancy.
Which is so
I
fancy.
still don't really understand what it is.
Well, and I'm sure people listening don't understand either. So do you want to give them a little... I feel like
basically
it's
means
the
that you're
equivalent of being
epic
knighted.
humans.
Like, that's how I see it. You know, you've
There was a
basically been
sword
knighted by the
involved.
queen.
There was a sword
Was
involved.
there?
No, there wasn't.
Uh-uh.
So I guess Luce and I at the beginning of the year, I guess it was quite humbling to be to receive an Order of Australia medal. As part of Australian honours, I guess. So it was a bit of a surprise, I guess. You're vetted by government, which was interesting. I guess we made the cut in that regard. But we are both really keen, I think, to use our platform as recipients of the Order of Australia medal to really improve the diversity of the medal. It is a great honour, I think. There are so many people out there that are so worthy of them. We did feel like the ceremony itself was full of a room full of people that were basically much older, very, very white, and very, very male as well. So
Which is why 3 reasons why it's so awesome that you girls both have that award. Really incredible.
Thanks.
I feel like we're making you
tell how
uncomfortable
awkward
now.
it is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm connecting the last two questions that you asked. One being about how all businesses should be really doing business for good, and I guess the opportunity now through recognition to create a model that maybe others could look to. And I wanted to name that in more recent years, I've been thinking about how doing good doesn't mean just the service that we provide. So Project Rockit obviously provides services to schools to tackle a really important social issue, but I don't think that our obligation to serve a cause ends there. And for us, one of our guiding principles at Project Rockit is never perfect, always striving. And that's an ethos that underpins, the way we work with schools, the way we work with teachers, the way we work with corporate partners in government, and the way we treat each other. And for me, that's really important to understand that, we're not perfect, we're not done. We can create social change in many different ways, and starting within our organisation. And for us, that's been really important as, co-CEOs. We may be women in a male-dominated world of business, but we're also cis women, where we may be queer, but we're also white. And understanding that, to tackle an issue as complex as bullying, as complex and dangerous as hate in this world, and as multifaceted as prejudice, and how as inborn and unconscious as it is, that we need to be creating opportunities for people who are more diverse than us to have a voice on these issues and to have agency. And so that's why we see our role in doing good as a business not just being about the core provision of service to schools, but also in the way that we create channels to employment at Project Rockit, to leadership, to advocacy, to government, to have people's voices and identities represented at every level of social change that we enact at Project Rockit. And it's not easy. It's something that we're not perfect at. As I said, never perfect, always striving. And I think like this OAM opportunity was a real great example of the fact that we might have been the youngest people in the room, but we definitely are very, very privileged, and there's so much great work out there that needs to be lifted up through I guess the privilege that we have, and that's something we're really committed to.
I think that's what's brilliant about social enterprise, though, about a social business is, yes, while all businesses should be thinking socially, just because, you know, Pepsi rolls out some sort of social justice, billion-dollar social justice campaign, you know, every couple of years, that's not a social business. I think really it's making tough decisions where you could grow really, really fast if you wanted to. We could be raking in the dollars or expanding left, right, and center, but we'd be doing it in a way that really wasn't true to the mission and really true to becoming the organization that we really want to be, in terms of making sure that it's so inclusive and diverse and really representing all the different types of young people that we serve. And so that's what I think is really great about being in a social enterprise, is that it really holds you accountable to your mission. If you're in schools tackling these issues, you need to be walking the walk every day as a business as well.
100%.
It reminds me of something that I heard, a quote that was about thinking with your heart and feeling with your head. And I feel like everything that I'm hearing you talk about, like, you really kind of encompass that and like take that on and lead with that, which is really, really admirable.
And I think for us, you know, like what you're saying, like it applies to all businesses. Like for us, you know, we're in the fashion industry, and often people are like, oh, well, why don't you drop the price, move your production over here, and you could be like, you know, making millions or whatever. And it's just like, you know, so many people have been taking that path for so long, and we have to make decisions all the time that are like, yes, we're going to take a hit to profit. We could be growing like crazy in this way, or we could be, you know, getting the easy wins by targeting like these kinds of people. But it is about now like stopping and going, well, what impact do I want to have in the world? I don't just want to make a quick buck. I think as millennials and Gen Z, we want to our legacy to be more than that, to be more than just about money and power.
Yeah, and I actually want to connect that very idea back to your comment about having grown up around the age of 10, 11 and participating in bullying. Like if you can gain literacy about power early on and the way that you can use it for good or you can misuse it, then I think we're going to be building the kinds of citizens that will create the kind of businesses that will make these sound, robust, ethical decisions. Like I think that the tide really is changing when it comes to the way that people utilize their power and their agency in this world. You know, we see the rise of movements calling out people's abuse of power, and I think that we're left asking, like, what model of leadership it will follow. Will follow that wave of a new generation that is literate about, yeah, we may not be, you know, the most powerful people in the world, but all of us have some degree of power, and it's about leveraging that for good. And
I think, like, whether it's at school, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's in business, it's really about making those decisions. Sometimes they're little decisions, or, you know, around like, what impact am I going to have? But in life, what I've learned, and I think I really understood this when we started Project Rockit, is as humans, we don't ever have a neutral impact. You can't ever be neutral. In a situation when something arises, you're going to have a positive or a negative impact, and doing nothing is actually having a negative impact. And when you start, I'm not usually into the binaries, but when you start positioning positive versus negative, you start to realize that actually everything that we do, every interaction, big or small, is going to have an impact, and we have an opportunity to have a positive or a negative one.
Oh, I love the you know, I feel like there's so much like doomsday talk about the world, the state of the world now, but I feel like talking to you guys, I'm like, we're all in safe hands. We've got this. The world's going to be just fine.
Yeah, that's so true.
So it's easy to have that belief when you work at Project Rockit and you get to work with young people each day. You know, I feel sometimes a sense of hopelessness being on Twitter and seeing, you know, enormous hate and just people being so vile and ideologies getting out of hand. But then, like, you walk into Project Rockit and you get to speak to presenters, or you go and see a workshop, you shadow a workshop, and you hear these incredibly hopeful conversations being directed not by our presenters, by young people, sharing their ideas, their literacy, their insights, their passions, their visions. And you can't help but walk out of there and be like, okay, how do we put these front and center? Because that's what's going to change the world.
Totally. Well, and on that note, do you want me? And on that note of social media, so you guys have a lot to do with Facebook and Twitter, is that right?
Yeah. We a while back we decided that, you know, we know that a lot of bullying plays out online on social media. Rather than working against the social media platforms in which we post much of our lives, why wouldn't we work together? And actually, when over time, as the major social media platforms started to notice Project Rockit's work and see that it was truly youth-driven, started contacting us and wanting to team up. So early on, we ran a number of campaigns that were empowering, diversity or literacy around cultural diversity or creating connections across different communities, because social media is a wonderful tool for that. And as time marched on, we started to look at how we could work more closely and started teaming up by jumping on the advisory and safety boards for a number of these organizations. So Ro and I sit on Facebook's Global Safety Advisory Board, which is an incredible opportunity to leverage young people's experiences all over Australia to the people who can actually create policy change and change to the structure of these platforms to do better, as well as, and that's now led to a partnership with Facebook and Instagram as well, which Ro can tell you much more about. We also sit on Twitter's Global Trust and Safety Council, which brings together representatives and organizations from all over the world, which is so important because these issues don't exist in a vacuum. They're entirely cultural and play out in such different and nuanced ways, not just for different age groups, but for different demographics as well. So yeah, really cool to be able to work with these communities.
And I think as well, platforms really rising to the challenge. They're not platforms, I should say. They're actually people behind the screen. And they're really, the people that we work with in trust and safety are really socially minded people that are injected into these companies because they really want to use the opportunity to change the way that we actually culturally engage with social media. But it's also really acknowledging, I guess, the shortcomings of the way that we use the digital world. So, for example, we have a partnership with Google to launch Project Rockit TV, which are really bite-sized episodes that basically answer really curly questions from young people about stuff that if you typed into Google, you'd probably get a dodge answer. Or if you asked your teacher at school, they'd give you a really daggy answer, or maybe they'd feel compromised. So something like, what do I do if my nude has been leaked? And our presenters answer these questions in a really kind of sassy way. And so Google's really got behind that, and YouTube's got behind that as a way of really making sure that young people are using these platforms to find really healthy content to answer some of those questions. But yeah, I guess we really see an opportunity not only to work with, help work with platforms to leverage our work here in Australia, but we actually really see an obligation now to be sharing young people's learnings from the top down. Our role on the Facebook and Instagram safety board, it's pretty cool to get to represent Australian voices on that board, because this is a platform that has 2.75 billion people. A third of the world's population are using Facebook. That's bigger than any continent, country, culture. The opportunity to create sweeping cultural change on the way that we treat each other online is enormous. And so getting to actually inject young people's views, their opinions on the platforms, their ideas, their complaints, their visions, and know that it is actually going somewhere to influence the way policies are created and products are created, is pretty cool. And it's something that we definitely feel is our obligation more and more so as we kind of mature, if you like.
So cool. That it's such an incredible opportunity. Like you say, you're just 18 starting this business in Australia, and now you guys are sitting on Facebook's board. That sounds crazy.
I know, I love just casually dropping in oh yeah, we're doing this web series with Google.
Yeah, I want to know, what does being on a Facebook board look like? Do you get to go there?
Is Mark there?
Do you do you Skype into the meetings, or do you have to fly?
I think I've seen you guys were in the Valley, right? You went over there to America.
Yeah, so we do go over quite a bit. I won't lie, it was really exciting, I think, when we first went, and it has been described as Disneyland for grown-ups. At the time when we first went, it was back in 2015. It was when we first really started to work quite closely with Facebook, and it was bizarre to be in a place like Facebook. It's a world of its own in many ways, and I think we were quite enamored with the fact that there was just restaurants everywhere.
And a room where you could walk into, and it's like a studio full of instruments, and you can just pick up instruments and start playing them to blow off some steam.
An ice cream parlor that looked like an 8-year-old's imagination had designed it, and everything's free, and we're really blown away by it. But I guess over the years, we have a really powerful partnership with Facebook and Instagram in Australia that, we've been working on for many years, but it all sort of culminated. Last year, we were really, really fortunate that Facebook and Instagram invested $1 million into Project Rockit to help us basically launch a new initiative in Australia that's transforming 10,000 students in years 7 to 9 into Australia's first generation of digital ambassadors. So they join the Project Rockit movement. We upskill them with loads of strategies and skills they need to not only just stand up and shut down hate and reclaim their I guess, online power for good, but to actually go back to their schools and create their own social change and inspire their peers to do so. So yeah, we definitely, and as the partnership person at Project Rockit, I don't do CSR. We don't do corporate social responsibility. We do impact partnerships. So we work with people that share our vision. We don't compromise on our vision. And yeah, we work together to basically make sure that what we do, whatever we do, actually has an impact, a tangible, visible impact.
Yeah, it's cool going to like these amazing places, and it's fascinating. It's so strange. It's like stepping into a fishbowl, and like everything feels absolutely surreal. But what's so much more cool is the impact of the work. Like I was actually just reflecting one of the earliest campaigns that we ran with Instagram, and Instagram's my favorite platform personally. I just really love it. Was called Today I Met, and it was based in Melbourne. They brought together students from different schools all over Melbourne, from different faith backgrounds and demographics and socioeconomic backgrounds, and public schools and independent schools, a total mix. And we brought together these students and partnered them with a student from another school. And through photographic portraiture, they were able to tell each other's stories. And so each student brought themselves, as well as an item that to them was a symbol of their belief system and their faith. So some people brought faith books and books of scripture. Some people bought like their Xbox controller. Other people, like one girl brought her AFL footy. And what was so cool is through these tools and these, I guess they're like totems, and the medium of photography, which plays such a big role in our lives, more than ever, more than any generation, they were able to tell stories of each other's identity and experience and diverse, culture, I guess, which was so cool. And the coolest thing about that was the actual global Instagram account took up a series of these photos and posted them. So to see your work and not just my work, I mean, for those young people to see their work and their creativity and their strength represented like that, to me is just so powerful and so positive. So we're really lucky that they're incredible enablers of great work for us.
Yeah, another really powerful moment was when we first went to Twitter. They had a chocolate fountain in their cafeteria.
What?
Like an actual chocolate fountain. And we were in a meeting at the time, and I don't think I took my eye off it. And right as the meeting ended, they shut down the chocolate fountain, so I didn't even get to stick my arm in it and lick my arm, you know?
Why don't they like advertise things like that? You know, like I would love to see, like, can they just pull up the curtain? I want to see the chocolate fountain.
Totally.
What do you get to stick in there? Like, that's what I want to know.
Well, I was just going to go my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you got, whatever's the
Yeah.
closest thing. So I mean, I know you're so wrapped up with these social media organizations, but are you positive about the future of social media? Because I think over the last kind of year or two, there's become this big conversation around social media really having a negative impact on mental health. And obviously, like, as young people come up, this is just like the way they interact. How are you guys feeling about the future of it?
Well, I wouldn't say from the get-go, I wouldn't say that I'm a fangirl of social media broadly and indiscriminately. I think that these major platforms need to be held accountable. I think they have a lot of work to do, and the people that we work with within the platforms are the first to acknowledge that. That's why they've chosen to work with us. So I think there's so much work to be done. I think that we need greater transparency and a greater kind of two-way conversation with the people who are making these huge, bold decisions about the way that our lives play out online. So that's the first thing I'd want to say. But also, I'm really hopeful about the future of social media. I think that social media can create a really toxic presence when it comes to our mental health, and it can be a real enabler of support and connection for those who are suffering. And so I think that it's a neutral tool. I don't see cyberbullying as a failing of technology. I see it as a failing of people, and that's why at Project Rockit, it's really important that we treat cyberbullying as a social problem and therefore come up with social solutions rather than just looking to the big platforms to fix the problem for us. And that attitude for me comes not from a place of wanting to let social media platforms off the hook. It's actually wanting us as human beings to have agency. And if we're constantly looking to someone else to fix our problems or make us safe or take away the possible harm out there in the world, then I don't think we're actually giving ourselves what we deserve, which is the choice and the power and the might to come together and actually create really positive experiences for each other. So for me, I think when we put technology in the hands of young people, what we really see is a striving and a desire to reclaim a tool that has been cast as such a negative by adults largely and by wider media, and wanting to reclaim that and use that power, as you put it before, for good. And so for me, that's really exciting, but I think it does require like a lot of collaboration, a lot of transparency, a lot of genuine accountability as well. And teamwork to do that.
Amazing.
So cool.
I think that's a really nice note to end on. Should I just check how long oh, is that an hour spot on?
I thought you were going to be like,
oh my
it
God.
wasn't recording.
I literally was like,
hit
1 hour.
No,
Sorry, we'll go
that's
again?
never happened before. Except one time when we interviewed Mia Friedman, we were going to her office to do it, and they were like, "Oh, like you can use all of our equipment. Like we'll just send you the audio." We were like, "Perfect." They contacted us a few days later. They were like, "We accidentally deleted the audio." And it was a nightmare. But then a couple days later, they were like, "Oh, but we filmed it and the audio's fine." So
Okay.
Before we do wrap up, I wanted to tell you both. I don't know if you remember, we met for the very first time years ago at Nexus in
Sydney.
Yeah, in Sydney.
Yeah.
And you both spoke, and the way you spoke, what you spoke about, but like you two just like as a force together, I was so completely inspired by it. And at the time, we didn't do much public speaking, but I called Jess and I was like, oh my God, I've seen these sisters speak. They are amazing. We need to somehow have a little bit of what they have.
She was like, I wish I recorded it for you, but like they did this performance. Like it was like, I was so engaged. Like
5, 6, 7, 8. Wasn't that such a performance?
Yeah, that she was like, one would talk, then the other one would talk. They were cutting each other off in the best ways. And like, it was just epic.
Sounds kind of like you guys.
Well, I
it
feel like
absolutely does.
that's where it started from. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, you really
So are
have
you
inspired us
doing
in that
more
way.
storytelling and sharing of your...
Yeah, completely.
Learning?
We just
Oh,
signed
so
on with a
that's what this
speaking
is, so-
agency
Amazing.
now.
Good
Yeah.
on you.
Yeah, no, we're really enjoying it. Yeah, and I guess like it's just like anything. Like when you started, it's absolutely freaking terrifying, and we hated it in the beginning. But now that we've done it a bunch, it's like much less.
I just think there's
nerve-wracking.
nothing better than that feeling though when you are shrinking a room from 200 to what feels like a conversation like what you guys are doing really now through this podcast. I just don't you think it's the most exhilarating feeling to create connection on that level?
1,000.
amazing.
Yeah.
There's actually no better feeling that I have felt.
And realizing that like it was something that we could learn to do because we weren't naturally like, oh my God, at school I would just die to get up and speak in front of 5 people.
Oh no, even at uni I remember like shaking and needing to pee my pants.
Well, even like people often say they're like, oh, I heard you speak. How did you get so good at speaking or feel so comfortable? And it's like, well, we've presented to hundreds of thousands of students
Totally.
Training,
over
you know,
13
to be
years,
a pretty
yeah.
critical crowd as well too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had to push and extend ourselves and drop the ego. Everything that you can imagine has gone wrong at some point. But yeah, public speaking can be learned, and it is a very
can.
powerful tool. I
Yeah,
Yeah.
and practice. It's all about the practice.
Yeah, and probably if we hadn't learnt public speaking, I wouldn't be a yoga teacher.
That's
Because
true.
that's
It
also,
makes it a
like,
lot
kind of
harder.
nerve-wracking.
Yeah. So we do always wrap up on some quick fires. So we're going to shoot some at ya.
You go first.
Okay. If you could go back into, I had fun with these ones. Some
I
random
haven't even
ones.
read them yet.
Yeah, there were some random ones. Like we got a bit repetitive with them. Like, what do you watch on Netflix? So you won't get asked that. If you could go back in time and be any age again, what age would you be?
I was going to give a mean answer and say 2 because you weren't born yet.
It's funny that you said that. I immediately thought 3. I'll tell you why. Because I can't remember it. It's really frustrating that I don't have early childhood memories. And we were talking about this the other day. You do remember things very early on. I don't know whether it's because I always had a big sister and so I was distracted constantly, but I'd love to know what it was like to be a young child. I don't think I have memories younger than like 11.
Really?
10
I was speaking with my friends about this the other day, and we were saying how like often things that stand out in your memory from when you were younger were really significant. So I guess
Traumatic.
if you kind of, often
Traumatic, yeah.
traumatic. Like my first memory, I was 3 and the teacher told me off and I was in the bathroom crying in front of the mirror looking at
darling.
myself. I know, like how sad is that? That's my first memory.
My
but-
first memories of feeling like intense embarrassment. And I
Yeah.
reckon it's the first time I felt that feeling.
Yeah, like the time in grade 4 when I read the word choir as choir.
Oh,
And the
that
teacher-
shit's traumatic.
Mrs. I shouldn't say in case she's listening.
No, I know who it is.
Anyway, you know who it is. She like totally made fun of me in front of the class. But yeah,
Aw.
but I think there's a certain level of curiosity in me, and that person that yearns to understand parts of myself that I don't get. that maybe if I travelled back in time to as an early child, I might understand a bit more.
I'm going to say a simple answer, 24, because then I could be a Project Rockit presenter. It was the best time. It was so good. I learned more in the 12 years that I was running workshops for Project Rockit than I ever learned in the 12 years that I was attending school myself. So
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And I love also that you describe yourself as an introvert, but then you were also, you know, a presenter, and like people just wouldn't associate those two things.
Well, I guess it's proof that public speaking can be learnt, right? I think when I was in school, I used to worry that if I got up and spoke in front of people, I'd spit on the front row and accidentally swear, and my fly would be undone and I'd do the wrong thing. And throughout my career running Project Rockit, I have definitely spat on the front row, accidentally sworn, said the wrong thing.
Those things almost make it better.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's like a tick list that once you've got them done, you're like,
But can I say how much I love watching, especially young introverts, when they realise that Luce is introverted, their mind open up and just for them to understand that, you know, you are the way you are. Introversion is a gift, and you are the way you are in terms of public speaking because you've worked very hard to be that way. And yeah, it's really cool watching them go, oh my God, that's me. Like, I'm like that. I can be like that.
That's
Really cool.
Do you have a favourite book?
yes. My favourite book is Alice in Wonderland. I love that book. I think it starts off as just any other day, you know, a girl who happens to see something odd. It's a rabbit wearing a waistcoat who's late, and she follows him without question. She follows her curiosity, dives down a rabbit hole into a world of the absurd, and is never the same again. And to me, I love the courage in being able to follow your curiosity and creativity, and for me it's a real metaphor that actually enabled me to start Project Rockit, that same kind of ethos.
I'm trying to think. I read a lot. I read a lot of like historical fiction. But I actually think the first book that just popped into my head then, just really randomly, is Shantaram. Who hasn't read it?
I've never read it.
I haven't, but everyone when we were like backpacking Europe was reading it.
It's just I think it's just full of adventure and full of spirit, and it just transports you to another place, and that's what reading does for me. It's my escapism. So I think something like that for me.
Cool.
Good ones. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
I can only think of really rude things as a joke, but what would my superpower be? What would yours be?
I think I would fly.
I think I'd be invisible. Oh, you would surely be invisible because you're so
I'm
snoopy.
so sneaky.
Are you?
Yeah.
I reckon I'm incapable of being invisible.
Well, I have a superpower. Do you want to hear what it is?
Yeah.
It's getting out of social situations really quickly when everyone's trying to do the awkward goodbye that goes on for a really long time. There's too much chat.
That's amazing.
I'm good at like shutting that down and getting out of there.
That's amazing. That's a great skill.
It's pretty
My
pretty
boyfriend
profound.
could really do with some of that skill.
Yeah. Oh, I guess is it flying? Is it being able to swim underwater? Well, I can swim underwater. I meant at great depths without any apparatus. Yeah, maybe let's go flight.
Flying.
Yeah.
Would be
How cool would
cool.
it be to
So
like
fun.
just jump in the air, like take off like Superman? And
Yeah.
zip
I'm
over
watching The
other side
Good
of
Place
world.
at the moment, and the way they fly,
Oh,
I'm just
it's
like,
so
I want to
good.
do
How
that.
good is
Yeah.
The Good Place? Talk
really
about
good.
escapism, right? That is a good show.
I only
good.
started watching it last week, and I am just like, I know I missed the boat by
I'm
like
so
4
happy
years,
for you.
but
The new season's coming out next month.
oof, it's good. What is your favorite place in the world? These are such hard quick fires.
Sorry. I was in my Byron mode, you know? They were just like a little bit too deep.
No, I have so many favourite places in the world, but my absolute favourite place that I've ever been is Kerala in India, which is just coincidence that I also named Shantaram as my favourite book. Although India is definitely the best place that I've ever been, the best, most engaged trip that I've ever been on.
The quick answer is home. I think wherever that is always feels like the best place. There's a place that I love. It's the place that has most amazed me anywhere in the world, and it's Palm Island, which is a island off the coast of Townsville. It's a community that's experienced intergenerational violence and dispossession of white Australia, and it's largely an Aboriginal population. One of my best friends has grown up there and lives there, and she's like a community leader. It's an amazing place. It's you really feel the resilience of Aboriginal people in general, and also just the unique culture and community and strength of people who have survived and continue to thrive. They're not just like alive, they're fully living and incredible. And just, the continuing challenges that they face, I feel a blend of anger and shame and frustration and just absolute awe at the brilliance and beauty and strength of Misane, my friend in particular, her son, and the community that they surround themselves with. I just think they're a real...
next week.
I'm going there next week.
Oh, amazing.
It's a real living, breathing example of the way that people can rise above bullying, hate and prejudice. And to me, when you walk on this land that we all walk on in Australia, it's pretty remarkable to see that resilience in action.
Really amazing. Yeah. And the last one, which I feel like is actually a quick fire. What do you eat for dinner?
What did you eat last
vegetables. Last night my girlfriend made homemade pizzas. And it was
God,
the
your
best. We
girlfriend's
ate at like
Italian,
11 p.m.
right?
because
Italian.
the dough.
Yeah.
She's Italian. I say that with my fingers pinched. But yeah, she's a phenomenal cook. We did eat at 11 because the dough had to rise in a particular way, and it took a very long time, but it was delicious. Yeah.
I had what I have most nights, which was lentil soup.
Oh my goodness, you and your lentil soup. You still do
Yeah,
that every
I
night?
like lentil soup.
It's every night.
Yeah, it's something
Good
about the
protein.
ritual of cutting up the vegetables when you lead such a busy
We are
life and
so
pressured
different. I
and-
cannot express it.
Yeah, I like that it's a meager meal that I wouldn't serve to anyone else, but it's packed with nutrients. And
It is delicious.
I actually
It
make
is.
a version of it that I also feed to my dog, which is pretty
I
wild.
know you were cooking before.
Yeah, I
we
was
left.
making that. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, amazing. This was such a fabulous conversation. I'm so excited about it. And I feel like we spent our entire day with you. So I can't
know.
thank you
Thank you
enough.
for
Yeah,
having us.
thank you
I feel
guys.
wrapped in your care. It was
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
yay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for everything you've created.
Oh, thank you guys.